very much for trusting me with this conversation. I mean, when we start talking about something like charter schools, there are so many different things that we can get into on this. Accountability, performance, unionism, and so many other things. But there's one thing that I just want to say before I introduce the panelists here about charter schools that I've noticed in my 30 plus years of my journalism career and covering charter schools since their inception here in Michigan. Charter schools thrive only where there is chaos, where there's uncertainty about the performance of your school, where there's uncertainty about the curriculum, whether there is fear about whether or not your kids are being given the quality education that they deserve. That's where charter schools tend to thrive. Notice when charter schools began, they were not our problem in Grosse Pointe. There was no need to have charter schools here because our school district was seen as one of the top performing districts, not only in the state, but in the country at that point in time. The fact is, the results are probably still pretty darn similar. We get good results. Kids are getting placed into great colleges coming out of our school system all the time. However, a seed of doubt has been planted as to whether or not we are falling behind. And once that seed of doubt is planted, you get people thinking that we need to do something different. Maybe we need to shake up the ecosystem. Maybe we need to de-emphasize our public schools and start thinking about something like charter schools, or I'm going to send my kid to a private school. And then, of course, you send your kid to private school, it gets expensive. You start thinking, well, what if there was a public school that conformed more to the kind of teaching I want my kids to get? Well, why couldn't I get those tax dollars to go to that type of education that I think is better for my kid? Once those seeds of doubt are there, create a division, that's when charter schools sneak in. It's been that way just about every place that they have ever been set up. It was easy to do in Detroit. We'll talk a little bit about where Detroit is right now, but half the kids are no longer in the Detroit Public Schools Community District that are eligible to be there because of that doubt that was placed in people's minds about whether or not DPSCD could do the right job of educating kids. So we can talk a lot about what the promise was for charter schools, what the people suggested that we should do and why we should consider them for our districts. And it was never a big deal until it started impacting our community. And now here we are with a pretty good sized room of people who are concerned about this and want to talk about it. So we'll get to that. And I want to introduce the panelists that we have here. And I'm going to give them each, after I introduce them, they're going to have a minute just to give an opening remark, and we'll try to get through this pretty quickly. But I'm going to put somebody on the spot here, and it's going to be Dr. Linh Dang. She's a senior policy specialist with the Education Policy and Implementation Center at the National Education Association. Her portfolio covers policies and programs relating to a wide variety of public school options, including, but not limited to, charter, community, and magnet schools. She was previously an adjunct professor of education research, a state legislative staffer, and tenured public school teacher in the San Francisco United School District. Dr. Dang, thanks so much for being here. You have a minute to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, can everyone hear me?
He's getting you right now.
Hi there. Trustee. If not, I'm happy to shout as well. Thank you, Craig, for that introduction. I'd like to thank you, everyone here. It's an honor to be here on this panel with esteemed speaker. Again, my name is Lynn. I'm a pro-public education advocate, and I'm just thrilled to have a conversation with like-minded individuals, people who are invested in public education, who are interested in just continuing this dialogue and learning from one another, because we know the community matters right now.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we're going to go to Arlyssa Hurd. Arlyssa was born and raised in Detroit. She's the mother of 2 sons. She graduated from Northwood University with a BA in Business Management and Accounting. She's currently a proud City of Detroit resident in the Hope Village neighborhood. Her passion and interest to work with families and the community began to develop as she managed and led the City of Detroit job training and workforce investment training programs. Because of the personal needs of her kids, Arlyssa is a strong advocate for special education with a particular interest in sickle cell anemia and ADHD. She's a regular volunteer within her community and within the school system. She's also served as the member of many boards, advisory councils, and community-led groups from various grassroots and faith-based and education organizations such as the Children's Center, Focus Hope, the Hope Village Revitalization, the Coalition for the Future of Detroit School Children, Mothering Justice, and the Detroit Public Schools. She's one of the founding members of 482 Forward and currently serves as a deputy director, leading the legislative work and neighborhood education teams. Arlyssa.
Hi, everybody. It's always funny when you listen to your own bio because there are so many things that like, well, wait a minute, what was that? But anyway, hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here. I I am first and foremost a parent. That is kind of what got me in this role, advocating for my children's education because they had two very different needs. Both have special needs, and I didn't realize how complicated education systems were until my children started going to school. And the only thing that I just want to encourage with is that we all know that schools are such an extension of our communities. That's the reason why we have to get this right. Because the 7-year-old that we do not engage today could very well be the 17 or the 20-year-old that causes us some problems tomorrow in our communities.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we have Angie Smith. Angie was elected to the Farmington Hills School Board in 2016. She's the single mother of 3 daughters who all attended Farmington Public Schools, graduates back in 2006, 10, and 16. That's quite the range, by the way. She's resided in Farmington Hills for over 20 years and was involved in her daughter's academics and extracurricular activities. She attended Wayne County Community College and Wayne State University with a major in mortuary science. She worked for Detroit Public Schools for 8.5 years in the special education department as a trainable aide in grade 1. And as a Farmington Hills resident, she served on numerous committees in the district. She's also served the district as a building PTA president, PTA council president, PTA state region D representative, and co-chair of the Farmington Hills MLK Walk. Her term expired in 2028, and she's on the SEAC to the Michigan Department of Education. Angie, welcome. Glad you could make it from the west side.
Hola, ¿cómo está? My name is Angie Smith. I am recently, as of November, retained my seat. I am the first African-American Latino woman to have gotten 15,555 votes. No one has ever received that many votes in the state, well, in Farmington Hills. I am a huge progressive Dem. I eat blue, sleep blue, think blue, drink blue. Not only am I the top vote getter, but I worked in the schools when my husband decided that he wanted a divorce. I went back as a new supervisor. And then after a new supervisor, I went back into being a parapro into the Farmington Public Schools. And I ended my career in Farmington Public Schools as the hall monitor at our alternative school. Our own police officers did not want to go in there. And during my tenure there, I only had one fight. So I know the schools inside and out, and I am a proud member to be proud to live and reside in the Farmington Public Schools. Yes, I do have an age gap with my children. That last one was an oops. But they all grew up and finished in the Farmington Public School District, and they all are very successful. My oldest is a massage therapist and has 3 businesses. My middle daughter is a surgical technician that is finishing up school to be an anesthesiologist. And my youngest is the top bud tender, not bar, bud tender in the state of Michigan. So she helps older people that need CBD oils and stuff like that. So I am proud to be here tonight. Thank you all for having me here. This is not an honor for you to meet me. It's an honor for me to be here with you, to tell you why I'm interested in students staying in public education. I want to continue to help your students or grandchildren, which I am not fortunate to have, to be involved in public education. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Angie. We appreciate it. And lastly, we have Brian Stackpoole. He's the TV production teacher at Grosse Pointe North High School. He's in his 25th year teaching in the district. He also started and coordinates the career and technical education programs for Grosse Pointe Public Schools. Brian, glad to have you.
Thank you very much, and I'd also like to thank the GP Dems for having this conversation and this much-needed conversation. I really want to focus tonight on how our local school district is doing, the strength and the power that we still have, and the content that we are delivering every single day to students, and the success that we're seeing in students, and the growth that we're seeing, and the excellent product that we are delivering to this community, and have been delivering, and will continue to, because our public education works in Grosse Pointe.
All right, we thank you very much. Senator Camilleri was supposed to be with us tonight. Obviously, there are lots of things going on in Lansing right now, so he was not able to join us. But I do encourage you, because one of the conversations we wanted to have around this were what sort of legislative action might be taken to sort of create accountability, more accountability within the charter school movement. He had some things to say about that, so if you have some questions about it, I'm sure we can get them forwarded to him, and he would be more than happy to respond via email. So we could probably get that little questionnaire out there for the senator. That'd be great, because I think you all deserve to know that there are things that are being done right now around this issue. And that sort of brings me to the beginning of this, and where I sort of want to start on this. Because we could dive right into performance issues, we could dive right into accountability, etc. But I do want to sort of give us a basis as to what charter schools actually are, who they are responsive to, and where this really came from. A little bit of history on this. And Dr. Ben, I think this is going to be sort of you. I mean, when you look at charter schools, technically they're public schools, but curriculum-wise, they can be pretty much whatever they want, correct?
That's correct, Craig. Hi, everyone. So, again, I'm from the National Education Association. I'm from Washington, D.C., so I'm here to share just the general national level information on charter schools. So, charter schools, the idea of charter schools came about in the late 1980s, and public education teachers, public schools were just thrilled about this concept where teachers get to create the schools. The schools are subjected to unions and district rules, and the schools serve as innovative sites where teachers can test out new ideas so that they can reach more students with other needs and whatnot. So it sounds well and dandy at the time. However, once the first charter school was opened in 1992 in Minnesota, we learned really quickly that profiteering became part of the movement. And fast forward to now, 30 years later of the charter school industry, we've learned that the charter school movement has been hijacked by the far right. We're seeing a new sharp turn in charter schools, and we're seeing classical charter schools, traditional charter schools, back to basic charter schools. These are all supposed to be public schools, but they're all privately managed, and they don't necessarily have to abide by public school. District rules, they're not held accountable by public school boards or anyone that's elected.
And I want to sort of talk about this as well. When you say that they don't necessarily have to abide by district rules, but there are also certain state requirements, especially here in Michigan, that they do not have to meet. Special education requirements, for instance. These are things that, if I'm not mistaken, they don't have to worry about. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. If you look at different charter schools across different states, they essentially have the ability to cherry pick their students. In public schools, we are required to serve all students with disabilities, English language learners. Charter schools, we will see that they have a disproportionately low number of students with disabilities, and again, students with English, who are English language learners.
Arlyssa, I want to get your take on that for just a second, because I know this is something that mattered to you as you were searching for a school to send your own kids to. How big a hurdle was that in terms of determining what services might be available and where was going to be the best fit?
Where do I start? So, what I've encountered as a parent personally, and also what we see a number of our families go through in 482 Forward is charter schools can tell you the classic statement, we don't have the resources to service your child. However, here's a list of all of the traditional public schools that you can go to. And what this does, this has a domino effect because it puts more of a burden on our traditional public schools, and in particular, we really saw this in Detroit with DPSCD. DPSCD has the lion's share of kids with special needs. When they show up on your doorstep, you have to service them. We're public school with public dollars. But what I can't seem to figure out is, how is a charter school that receives the public school allowance, that receives public dollars, allowed to not service or some way push out or conveniently pick students that may need their help and they're allowed to do so, and there's essentially no consequences? I think this also goes back to a lack of the transparency and the accountability. It's the way that charter schools came about here in Michigan with a lack of oversight, even to this day. What consequences do they have? You mentioned all of these charter schools. There are well over 70, almost 70 70 different school districts in Detroit when you're counting charters, because each charter school is considered its own district. Now we do have some authorizers who authorize more than one or two schools, and so that same school board serves as that entity or that overseeing body for that charter school. But when you mention chaos at the top of your opening, you're absolutely right, because this is the kind of chaos that people just can't seem to figure out. And who loses in situations like this? The parents and the families and the children, because it keeps you on this merry-go-round. The special ed parents are what we hear the most. Special ed parents have a lot to be mad about. I say they're the most mad, not only in the state, but across the nation, because there are lots of services and resources that our kids need that we just can't seem to get. It's not that it's perfect in a traditional public school, but it's even worse when you're talking about charters all too often.
I thought this would be important to talk to Angie about as well, just because you mentioned that the Detroit public schools, for instance, as we've seen, Detroit is the Wild West of charter schools, and people were more than happy to experiment in any way they wanted in that district because they figured nobody gave a damn. And let's be honest, this is back in about the mid-90s, that's just the way it went down. And Detroit was thrown to the wolves, frankly, and everybody was willing to try all sorts of different things. But when you look at what the actual school district in the city had to deal with, because again, if the charter schools don't have to provide those services, we're talking about a population where you're gonna have a lot of needs outside of just classrooms, studies. There are a lot of social issues as well that the public schools have been dealing with for a long time, but charters are not required to deal with. What kind of burden does that put on a public school district like yours?
I'm glad that you brought this up, and I want to piggyback off of Arlyssa here. When you have a charter, your school boards are not elected officials. You could just go pick a parent that may have a child that you know that's going to be in that school from K through 8, or that parent may be the parent that can raise the money to buy the cookies. But me, I was elected by the people. I am a government elected official. And it's interesting because it does cause chaos and turmoil. And not to throw anybody under the bus.
I would.
Well, I like to be in good trouble when I'm being videotaped. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is we do right now, our board president is a charter school teacher. And I have never seen such a circus out of the 27 years I've been in this district. It is my job. The people of Farmington Hills voted me in. I wear this proudly, 15,555 votes. This is what I got. And this is what the people of my community put out for me. Now, they didn't pay for this. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is my job is to hold my superintendent accountable. He works for me. My superintendent likes to say, we're a board of 8. No. We are a board of 7. We hired you. But we have a board president that is now making him be the boss because she's really following the other way. And then when I speak up, then there's a problem, but I'm not doing it to be facetious, but I've been on both sides, not only as a parent, but as a worker in the district. And it is causing our district a lot. Our test scores are bad. And they're bad around the whole state. But let's stop talking about it was COVID that made these test scores like this last year. But I'm finding that when you have worked in a charter, or you are part of a charter and you come over here to be an elected official, one, you need to go to board meetings. Don't watch them attend and see how a meeting is ran. After you attend those meetings, you need to also know that there are things that you have to do as a governance. And they don't do that in charters. They don't hold people accountable. Not only do they not hold people accountable, out of the 27, it'll be 27 years in August that I've been in Farmington Hills. I've sat on superintendent's team. I have been very active. I've never sat in a board meeting where all we do is clap all night and do recognitions, because we don't answer questions. Our situation is so bad right now that our mayors of both Farmington and Farmington Hills and city councils have asked to step in to do something, because she's allowing the superintendent to run the schools. Our mayors and city council have been censored by her and the superintendent because they don't want to answer questions. So you want to have someone, and I tell this to people all the time, and I don't mean to take up a lot of time. As Dems, go out and recruit people when you know these elections are coming up to get you someone that is active and involved in your schools. It could be a parent, a grandparent, but make sure you want someone that can run, that does not have a hidden agenda. And you want to be able to go, not just, oh, well, I want to run now because next month, but next year I'm running for state rep. You want to be able to have someone that looks out for someone like him. That's what I ran for school board for, is to take care of children.
I want to get Brian involved in the conversation here. Again, he's actually on the ground teaching. We actually had a chance to talk before this event to get to know each other a little bit beforehand. You taught at charter school.
I'm sorry, I did not teach at church with those, the other former state senator.
Oh, damn, that's right. That was Darren.
Yeah,
Sorry, I forget
yeah,
about it. So
Darren.
he actually had some interesting points. But,
I've been lucky enough that I was able to teach in Grosse Pointe my whole career, and I love it. And I love every single day teaching, right? And I believe I can teach every single kid that walks through that door. Our problem is we just need more kids walking through that door. I talked to a lot of teachers who we hired from charter schools. But why'd you leave? Why'd you come here? Sure, there's pay, there's some other things like that, but no one's getting into education for the pay, right? We all know this. We're doing this to help students, to make a difference, to sit there and say, hey, I can do a lot of jobs. There aren't many jobs that I can sit there and say, I helped change people's lives. That's what was so powerful about being a teacher. And so when I talked to some of the people that came over from charter schools, they were just sick of the micromanaging that happens at a charter school, where you get dumped on like many levels of professional development, where they really don't spend money on the classroom or the kids or the teachers, but just on other experts to come in and spend money on their friend that then becomes somebody that you talk to and they spend all their money on, and they're not spending it on the right thing. Or you have to send in daily lesson plans and make sure it approves it, but no one ever looks at it. So what it ends up doing is, we all know that education has some other struggles. This is everywhere, but there is a teacher burnout. And a lot of that is coming from charter schools, where people are going into charter schools, working for a few years, let's say 5 to pay off their student loans, and then they're quitting education. They're not trying to do another school. They don't want to teach again because they've had this negative experience in the charter school. And so that's one of the problems, I think, overall in education we're having. And one of the things that when we try to bring a teacher over from a charter school, they're like freed again, as far as like what they can teach and how much time they can spend on the important thing, actually working with students.
Well, Dr. Denny, I think this is something that we need to talk a little bit about, though, because there is a difference in terms of requirements for teacher education, whether it be charters or public schools. Michigan has pretty rigorous standards for teachers to keep their licenses, to be allowed to teach at all. You have to renew your license, and you have to have a certain number of credits that you put forward towards your master's degree, and even after your master's degree, there has to be continuing education. Charters do not have any of those requirements, do they?
You're absolutely correct there, Greg. So charter schools have different rules. They don't abide with the public school district rules, or like you mentioned, there are rigorous eligibility requirements, such as you must even have a teaching credential. You might be required to have a master's degree in teaching. I taught in San Francisco Unified School District. I had to have a master's to teach, and then go through a really rigorous pre-service experience, having a master teacher that would guide me through the first few years of my teaching Whereas in charter schools, there isn't this requirement. You can hire a student who just graduated from college who studied, psychology and had nothing to do with teaching. And even some charter schools say, hey, just come teach at our schools, and you can learn how to be a teacher during that process and get your certification then if it seems to require that.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is something that actually had a lot to do with the rise of charter schools and frankly, the decline in popularity of public schools. Part of that was demonizing teachers. This notion that if anybody can teach. I think I've seen this happen in this profession where my ex-wife is a teacher, has worked in both charter schools and public schools for a long time. I've never seen it where so many people thought that was an easy job, that anybody could do it, that this is something that the low education achievers in college go into. I guess this is something that I think that I want Brian to talk a little bit about, because I've noticed this, and that was a big part of getting people to think that if anybody can do this, it doesn't matter where you send your kid to school.
Absolutely, and I think some of the pandemic, opened some eyes as far as when all of a sudden you had to teach kindergarten, and I know I was teaching kindergarten to my little guys, I was teaching high school, my wife was teaching middle school, and that was a struggle. But I think it opened up some eyes to saying like how important it is to have kids in front of a certified teacher, and having that classroom experience and why it's magical, right? It's the teacher's job to get kids excited for them to come in there and do it every single day. And as far as speaking from our school district, I can tell you about passion, because you're not going to stay in Grosse Pointe unless you're a passionate educator. You need to be in love with your curriculum. You need to be an advocate for it. You're going to try to get kids to maybe all of a sudden think that, yes, you are going to be a historian, or you're going to be going to economics, or you're going to go and, you love, AP Calc. It's a struggle, right? But those teachers there, they turn those kids around and they prepare them for their future. We're still sending kids to the top schools in the nation, and we are still trying to get our kids to go to that level, and we do an excellent job making sure that our students' needs are met. I have a son that's also a special education student, and I thought I knew education and how schools worked. And then my son's going through the process, and I've been through dozens of IEPs. I knew all this stuff, and it was completely different as a parent. When you said that, I was like, absolutely. It enlightened my eyes as far as like what I thought I knew as a teacher, and then seeing the parent having both of that perspective and making sure that, yeah, we do a great job, but we should always be working on doing a better job in special education, because we take every single kid in. It is important, and I would be concerned that if a charter school opened up near our community and they wouldn't accept my son because he costs more. And that's the real reason why he wouldn't be let through the doors, because he's a little bit more expensive than another kid they could let in. And I don't think that's good for our community.
Can I?
Yeah, please. Yeah. Go ahead, Arlyssa.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries.
So, yes. And I just wanted to say also that the leadership oftentimes changes so much in charter schools. We've seen this, I cannot tell, you can pull it up, the countless number of charter schools that have closed in the city of Detroit. I mean, it is nothing for parents to have a principal or a school leader, as they call it, in September, and by January, that leader is now replaced, and there's a whole nother group of people that have come in to teach your children. Just the instability of all of that. Also, I want to add, I believe that teachers' salaries should start at 6 figures, because they are that important in my mind. That's just me talking, because they spend the most time with our children. A teacher has the power to either engage or break. And I hate to say break, but we all know that all teachers are not good teachers, but not this one here, not this one. But we all know that a teacher has the power to help lift your child up or break your child down. That's not something light, in my opinion. That's not something that I want to entrust with just anybody that's interested in a job or a paycheck. But because teachers are blamed, parents are often blamed, and it keeps a finger pointing at both groups, no wonder some of the reason why we have a teacher shortage. Who's signing up for that? When teachers are blamed for that. But I wanted to add that We all know that our schools, first of all, are underfunded by $4.5 billion in the state of Michigan. Michigan is dead last when it comes to increasing school funding. Now, the way the legislature looks now, there are some great things that they have just recently done. But there's 20, 30, 40 years worth of, I call it, foolishness that has been allowed to go on in our state legislature, which has impacted our schools in a serious, serious way. And you're right, COVID opened up a lot of eyes. And in a way, it's a blessing and a curse, but it allowed us to, first of all, see firsthand what experiences teachers have in the classroom and how important that is, how important parents are in their children's lives, and how important it is with socialization and all of those skills that you learn outside of a book that our children need.
All right, Dr. Daniel.
Yeah, sure. I have 3 points to add now. Thank you, Arlyssa, for bringing that up. And I totally 100% agree that teachers should be paid 6 figures. Without teachers, there would be no doctors. There would be no Craig moderating this panel right now. So.
This is easy.
Arlyssa mentioned school closures, and I just wanted to share that there was a federal analysis done between the years of, I believe, 1999 and 2020. And the analysis found that there was a high failure rates among charter schools, that 25% of charter schools closed within 5 years during that time frame.
And why are they closing? Is this an academic thing, or is this they're not profitable enough for the operators?
Could be all of the above.
Well, let's talk about studies for just a second, because a card came in here, and I knew we were going to get to this. But this question was that said numerous studies have compared charter school test scores with those of public schools that surround the charter, like in the same area. I don't have the results of that test. I don't know what the results were, so maybe you're familiar with it, maybe you're not, but where are they when it comes to performance? Because we were promised that this was going to be something that increased student performance because it was going to free them from bureaucracy, red tape, government BS, and of course teachers unions, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
I'm happy to start.
She's got the numbers, that's why I'm looking at you.
Not technically real numbers, but I'll explain more. So over the past several decades, there have been think tanks and other organizations that are charter school proponents who have funded many studies, reports, publications, however you want to call it, to purport that students in charter schools perform better than traditional public schools. However, if you just look at the study carefully, you would see that the methodology that was always conducted, the trend across all these studies are deeply flawed, significant to the point where you can just render those conclusions invalid, essentially. I'd like to highlight a study that some of you may probably have heard of. It's conducted by CREDO, the Center for Research and Education Outcomes. It's a center funded through a pro-charter group called Hoover Institute. And they come out with a study, I believe every 10 years or so, but the most recent one, the third one, came out just this past summer, and they had data from across 31 states between 2015 and 2019. And they had a massive data set. And if anyone here is a statistician, you know, as long as you have a massive data set, you'll always have some sort of significance in your study. And even then, I won't go into the details of what they did and how they conducted the study, but their ultimate results showed very little difference between the math achievements between charter schools and traditional students, along with literacy. However, given that small marginal difference, they were able to just talk it up and see that this was a remarkable findings, that students in charter schools are now outperforming students in traditional public schools. And they were making headlines in the Washington Post and Angie, but I don't think anyone actually dug deep into the study to expose them. A group that I would recommend for you to look up is the Network for Public Education. They did a study that evaluated that study, essentially, showed that the results were just meaningless. I'd like to share a quote from Matt Barnon of the education news publication Chalkbeat, and the way that he described the study I just think was in such simple terms that we can know whether or not charter school students are performing better. So Matt says, Credo found that attending a charter school for 1 year would raise the average student's math scores from the 50th percentile to the 50.4 percentile. By conventional research standards and common sense, these impacts are very small. Unfortunately, Craig, I don't think there have been studies that I would say done rigorously that I can say have truly demonstrated that the charter schools are performing better. And to that point, really, that means we're just letting parallel school systems for what?
Well, but that's the interesting question. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of different reasons for it. One, government money is a wonderful thing to be able to get into the business of getting. There are a number of different fronts where this is happening, and I've always said there are two places where profit does not belong. It's education and healthcare.
That's right.
That's just the way I believe. But I mean, it certainly seems as if this is a way for people to get in on a steady stream of guaranteed money every single year.
I believe it's a money grab. We've got more than 80% of our 80% of our charters are for profit. Now, I want to just add this caveat because my son also went to a charter school. I'm not saying that all charters are bad because there are some that are really doing well, but the ones that I found are the ones that are not for profit that are doing well. So you'll figure that out. Our children, same profit for selling cars or opening at the Dollar Tree, but not our kids. Because I think when things become for profit, there's all different kinds of motives that come into play there. I just wanted to just add a little bit, when we talked about like school closures, for instance, the families are left out in the cold. One of the things that I think gets under my skin and that we've seen time and time again, charter authorizers or charters that underperform or are just absolutely terrible, there really isn't too many consequences.
Right.
I mean, they just, a lot of times what we've seen time and time again is they just move on to another community or they actually expand or go somewhere else or get another charter school. We've seen that time and time again. Close one down, open another one. And I think that adds to all of the chaos of the Wild Wild West. We even had, there were, I guess what you would call maybe your top charters across the nation who at one point they were asking for those charter operators to come here. They refused because of the way Michigan runs their charter system. It is complicated, it's layered. There are things in the Michigan Constitution that we can't seem to figure out. You could get just about anybody that can open up a charter. The Michigan State Board of Education has relatively low power. I mean, there's not a whole lot that they can enforce. So what I'm saying is, in addition to, and then on top of all of that, we have, the main problem is inequities. We have inequities in our system. What Grosse Pointe needs, Madison Heights may not need. And what Flint needs is different than what Detroit needs. Funding, the way schools are funded is one thing that I think would help to resolve some of the issues because of the inequity in the way that our schools are funded. But charter oversight and accountability and transparency has got to be at the top of some legislators' list. And I will say this, so I'll step out. I feel comfortable in saying this. I do know that there are a set of charter bills that is being looked at right now, so there may be some things coming down the pipe, and I was hoping that Senator Camilleri would be here to kind of talk about that. So we're hopeful that there are some things that are opening up, but we're looking at almost 20 years worth of just willy-nilly, just do what you want, harm whoever you want, and that's not right.
It seems one of the things that I've noticed in watching this debate over the years is that the rationale for needing charter schools is starting to change as well. Again, they started out, inner city schools in particular, talked about improving performance, etc. Now you've got, since they don't have the data to necessarily back up the fact that they are performing any better, they're shifting focus a little bit. Now it's about curriculum, now it's about parents' rights and making sure that you have a say in what your kid actually learns. That seems to be the sort of crack, the wedge that they can expose in a city like Grosse Pointe. We start talking about conservative curriculum, and oh, my kid needs to have, the curriculum from, say, Hillsdale College, which we all know is a very conservative college. There's some discussion about that. But do you see that there's sort of a pivot in the rationale for the need for charter schools?
I think it's been very obvious of that pivot. I always look at the curriculum issue as a gigantic issue. And I also want to go back to the transparency. I think one thing that is a strength in this community is how dedicated everyone is to the school district. And that means watching every single audit and watching how the district spends its money. It doesn't matter where you fall on the spectrum of your political beliefs, you want to make sure that that money is accounted for correctly. And we're not going to have that with a charter school. We're not going to know who owns the building and how much are they actually leasing that building for. And when that charter fails, are they just paying another one? And how much are they really bringing in on those issues? It's just something to me that's too uncertain and something that I'm not interested in.
There's an interesting question, sort of getting back to the performance question for just a second. Is there a place online to get credible charter school performance information? Or is it on individual schools, individual sites for those places? Or is this something that the chartering agencies, such as Central Michigan Eastern, whoever, Saginaw Valley, whoever charters these schools, are they required to keep that information?
Well, I can't speak to what they're required to keep. They should be reporting. There's a whole lot of data that we found out that they're not reporting. For instance, suspensions and expulsions, they tend to be very high in that you can't find the data. There was a lot of charter data that we just simply could not find. And most of the time, with the experience that we've had is that we've had to FOIA just about everything, even though a lot of our requests would go largely ignored.
Yeah, how the FOIAs go? Next day?
Yeah, right, yeah, next day, sure, they were in a hurry to get it to us. But I will say this, there are a number of people that I know for a fact that are looking at this. For instance, I do have some charter data that we work very closely with Dr. Sarah Linoff, who is Wayne State professor and just knows all of the things and all of the numbers as it relates to all schools and performances. That's a lot of times how we've leaned on or gotten extra information, and even from some of our partners. But as far as exactly where all of the data is being held or kept, I don't know. The Michigan Department of Education, though, does have data as it relates to like performance and test scores and all of that. But even in that, there's still a little bit of question marks when it comes to charters. And that also goes to the point of the chaos and how layered these things are. Why do you have to go through all of that? Why do you have to consult all these other people to get the real data and you don't know for sure? And which makes it really, it just makes it a lot more complicated for parents and students and all of that. But I'd be happy to share information that we have. However, I would suggest that the first step would be going through the Michigan Department of Education and seeing what they have online. But especially for individual schools, good luck. Individual charters, good luck.
Well, and here's the other thing. Sometimes you gotta look at the financial performance as well. So not only do you have to read the educational reports, but their books, just to see if they're gonna be open next year, because we have had some schools in Michigan that just closed in the middle of the year, and you're out of luck, and you gotta find a place to enroll your kid on the fly, which, that's not very cool. All right, so here's a question. How often do charters get decertified or desponsored? And maybe there's some national data on this, maybe we don't see it very often in here in Michigan. And the follow-up to this was, can we put pressure on Central Michigan University to remove the sponsorship of Hill Point, which I believe is the proposed school here. Clever name, by the way. This person says, I have their application, there are many flaws. Well, I'm not sure what they are, but if you want to elaborate, feel free. But how often do we see schools actually decertified? We haven't seen that very often.
Now, decertified, I'm not sure, but I will say this. We have seen schools closed, but not necessarily by the Michigan Department of Education, even though they have the right to force closure on schools that are lowest performing. And the superintendent can also suspend the authorizer if they are not basically playing by the rules or not performing, appropriate oversight. But but also with that, you've got universities that are able to charter, community colleges that are able to charter, you have the ISDs that are able to charter, as well as your local K through 12. Detroit Public Schools has a set of charters, but Dr. Vitti has already announced that they're going to be sunsetting those because he was not interested in the charter business. But this also goes into this chaos, which is who is who's watching what and who's responsible for what. And when you don't like something, how do you resolve it? How do you get it? How do you take care of it? But now, as far as the decertifying, and I'm assuming that's similar to a closure, we haven't seen a lot of that as far as charters is concerned from the Department of Education's perspective. But what we have seen is charter boards close down schools, their own charter board will close down a school based on low enrollment, I believe it's profitability, and all these other things, and force parents to be scrambling for schools in the middle of the school year. We've seen that time and time and time again, and parents left holding the bag. Just a real quick story. We had a charter school that closed, and the seniors could not get their records, and they were all set trying to go to college, and it was a nightmare. There was almost essentially nothing that could be done. And we had one of our families, one of the students went to another school, and that school wanted her to start over in the 11th grade because they didn't have, or the 10th grade or something, because they didn't have all the proper information. It's these kinds of things that create such a nightmare that no community should have to endure. And what we often see, and you mentioned it at the top, charter schools tend to experiment in urban neighborhoods. We're talking Flint, Detroit, Saginaw, Benton Harbor, Ypsilanti, you name it, and even in Lansing. So the urban areas. However, you don't see a lot of charter high schools. Why is that?
I was just about to get to that question, because you do have a lot of K-8 charter schools. I can't remember the number that I saw, but it's the vast majority of charters are only K through 8. They don't want to do high school. What does the research show on high schools and why they don't want to go there? Do you have any answer on that one, Dr. Day? I mean, one, it's more expensive to teach high school kids.
It's more expensive. You need actual people that are your AP Euro teacher, right?
Or masters in
And
that, or
your master's,
certified in
like,
actual
that is
school
it.
subject.
And yes, we teach kids, but we also do a lot with them after their school. And athletics and activities are also expensive to run, and things that we take great pride in here that most charter schools can't even come close to offering.
I want to get Angie.
By the way,
Okay.
Greg, I didn't know I just found this out. If you look at the number of sports in the state of Michigan by schools, it goes University of Michigan, Michigan State University, Grosse Pointe Public Schools, all the other universities in the state of Michigan, and then finally another school district. So what we offer kids is just unparamountted as far as in a K through 12 setting.
Okay, that's actually a really nice pivot there for Angie here, because I do want to get a sense as to the lack of faith that you start seeing from people when, again, they start thinking that there's something going on in the system. They start losing faith in their public schools, which opens that door that we talked about. What are you hearing in Farmington right now from parents about the quality of schools, and what do you think they are getting wrong about what's going on in your school system?
Excuse me, I just had the flu shot last Thursday and came down with the flu on Friday. So, excuse me. Our school district used to be a premier school district. And the reason being is because we focused on not only our academics, we were known for our arts. We had a beautiful art program. My daughters all speak 2 languages, and the other ones were what you would call Ebonics from the neighborhood, because our community is very diverse. We have over 100 different languages and dialects. So my children grew up with Jewish students, Russian students, Indian students, and so forth. So when it comes down to what I'm seeing as a former parent, my children grew up with having the fine arts, and all three of them played at least 2 to 3 instruments. And so when you find that instrument, you find that music plays a big key and role in math. And so what I'm finding as a parent, and I'm from old school. On Wednesdays, there was no TV, there were no electronics. You sat down at a dinner table with a tablecloth, with flatware. There was no burping. There was none of that. You were acting like you were in a restaurant. I don't care what you did Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is what I'm seeing is we have lack of that partnership with the parents. And I tell people that you have not made it, even though you live in a $400,000 home and you may drive a Benz, you have not made it until your children have made it. So what my children have learned, I'm seeing that most children in my community is not getting the same things that I taught mine, as well as our teachers are phenomenal. We have the best teachers, but the support, and you see that it's not there. But what I'm seeing is that our fine arts program has gone down by the wayside. Our music program, things like that, our foreign language classes. We do have a STEAM school. We also have IB and AP classes. But many of our students are leaving because we're seeing that our boys, they're cute when they're in 3rd grade, but after 3rd grade, something happens with the African American community. So our parents are pulling our children out, and they're going to our neighboring schools, West Bloomfield, Novi. We're seeing a decline. They're staying in the community and keeping the homes, but they're sending them to Detroit, Southfield, West Bloomfield, and Novi. Our Indian population of students, they're going to Novi, Northfield, and South Lyon. Because it's not the performance with the staff, because we do need to continue to support our teachers, but our students, it's something that is going on, and I just don't know what it is. I went to a conference a couple of months ago in Chicago for inner city students, and Ice-T was the keynote speaker. And I've had conversations with him and other people to ask, what are we doing wrong? But I think what the problem is our minority students, even our white students, even want to be involved in technology. Everybody that's look like me don't want to be a rapper. You got some white kids that can rap too, but we need to bring some of that back and let people know that, and do our CTE, which is our career technical, because everybody don't want to go to college. Some people want to be like my youngest daughter, and I was upset when I found out what she wanted to do for a living. But she's worked with Allen Iverson and Chris Webber and some of those people, and I didn't realize, well, this girl is a genius because she knows math and science. So our students are leaving, and some of it is because some of us are getting along in the tooth, and we're not having any more children. But most of our students are leaving, and they're coming to other areas. They're going to Southfield and they're going to Renaissance at Cass Tech. And we have state-of-the-art schools, and we don't know what's causing it.
Well, the schools of choice is another discussion. Somebody can bring that up on the card. That seems to be sort of a new charter school movement where you just send the kids to a different district and everything will be hunky-dory there. And the dollars go with them. I think, obviously, dollars chasing students is part of the issue here.
But West Bloomfield, what I love about what they do, you cannot enter their school of choice if you have a discipline record or history. So you may be the top-notch student, but if they see you got a laundry list of things that you've done, even if it's just in elementary.
But you have to deal with it, though.
what we have to deal with.
Charter schools don't have to take those kids.
They don't have to take them at all.
So isn't that a bit of a disadvantage for the public school system?
And even your special ed, which I sit on the special ed advisory committee for the state of Michigan, and it's really against the law to turn a student away. You're not supposed to turn a student away if they have special needs or have a 504 or a IEP. But charter schools, for some reason, can do that.
Craig, I'd like to just add to that really quickly too. So these charter schools, they can also choose the option of accepting the students, students of disabilities or students with behavior issue, and take the funding. Some call it backpack funding because the funding follows the students. And decide that the charter school doesn't have enough resources to take care of the students and push them out and keep their money, and the student goes back to the public school district without that expense, without the revenue to fully fund their schools. It's another way to drain funding from our public schools.
All right, well, we got a few minutes left here, and I do want to get to a couple of other issues here, and I brought it up sort of tangentially, but in our discussion the other day, I mean, this is my opinion, but it's basically rooted in things I actually heard the governor say at the time when he was making the first push for charter schools. This was about basically busting the teachers union. Most of these are non-union shops, but I did want to get a sense as to whether or not there is any movement on the horizon to unionize these schools. Is there any success out there? And are teachers in these schools starting to recognize that there is strength in numbers and they need better representation if they actually want to keep them there?
Guess I'm the union person I should answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Craig, I'm really glad you brought that up, and that when we had that conversation, it got me digging, going down a rabbit hole of research too, and unfortunately there isn't, this area of research is understudied, and if there are any researchers in the room, I encourage you to start digging in as well. But on behalf of the NAA, we believe that all educators deserve the right to a collective voice. And we do believe that an organized workforce is the best guardian of quality standards for our students and our schools and our teachers. To answer your questions on what's readily available in terms of research for unions and schools, I found a study done in California. It's a quantitative study. I'm from California. California has the most number of charter schools in the state. And during the wave of unionization, the study was conducted looking at student achievement data. And there was a finding that there was an increase in students' performance in math after unionization across the schools. And we're all familiar with New Orleans, probably post-Hurricane Katrina. Schools there were just converted into charters, and the city that once had a unionized workforce had one no longer. And there were a couple of single charter schools where the teachers said, hey, you know what, we want to unionize. And through a qualitative study, we learned that these teachers were tired of pay inequities, they were tired of job security, and they were tired of not having a voice at the decision table. So teachers are showing that they want to unionize, they want to have a voice, they want to have a better working environment, and especially under everything that we've talked about, teacher burnout, unions can help.
We have, and as we've hired teachers coming from a charter school, they're thankful that they have a choice to join a union, and that's one of the first things they want to do. They feel better about being a part of it, and just knowing that someone's watching out for them, and that if they see and they want to make improvements, like the union's there for that. And so it's been a really eye-opening for me, because I've always been in Grosse Pointe School District, getting some people from the charter school and just how thankful they were to have the choice to join the union was actually pretty powerful.
Well, Brian, I wanted to ask you this question too, sort of piggybacking on the question I asked before about what you're hearing in the community from parents and other, about the quality of the schools. Are you getting a sense that there are chipping away at the foundation, frankly, of what was always something that we hung our hat on? This is something we were most proud of, was our excellent school system that we had here. Are you getting a sense that faith in our district is waning?
When I talk to parents, absolutely not. When I talk to people that go into schools every single day, that drop their kids off, that I see, pick up and drop off, no. They see what's happening. They know what their kids are bringing home. But the people that don't, the people that are in this community that have very little, I talked to a couple of retired teachers and I saw them this summer. They're like, oh, how's the year? I heard it was terrible. I was like, it's my best year ever. I loved it. We did this, yeah, there's some other stuff at the school, but like me teaching in the classroom and learning with the kids, the best. It's fantastic. They're like, what? That's not what I've read, because that's the only source of information they have. And I'm telling you, talk to people who have kids in their school, in the school right now. What are they like? I'm not saying we're perfect. I'm not saying that we can't improve. But I'm telling you, we are still delivering that top-notch education that this community deserves. It's why I came here to work. I came here because this was the best school district in the state and one of the top in the nation, and I wanted to be a part of it. And why am I fighting so hard as a union member is that for my kids who are 8 and 4 years old, I want them to have the same quality of teachers that I've had the pleasure to work with for the last 20-some years as they're gonna have. And that's the fight that we need to continue.
You know, I want to talk a little bit about where this narrative is coming from. But I can see how it can creep in, right? My son graduated in 2018. He's off to college. He just moved to New York. We lost another one to the state of Michigan to New York City. But went on Kalamazoo College, did great, all that kind of stuff. So it's like out of sight, out of mind a little bit. Once your child is graduating, you start losing a little bit, and then do you become somehow more susceptible when it's not your kid that's being impacted? Are you?
Or you just see the headline, you're not really sure what's going on. Oh, there's a problem there, that's it. But you don't know the details. You don't know that, like, they had this great successful, the homecoming week was still amazing. And this thing still happened that kids love. And, we just have fewer students. It's the declining enrollment that we're still facing in this community, like so many others, that we need more students coming through our doors. We're not open, right? We're not a school of choice, and that's something that the community and the school board is very dead set against, and I don't see us changing in any way. But I also look at it like I'm frustrated that there was always a community survey sent out by previous boards, and the last school board canceled that. They sent it to staff, they sent it to parents, and they used that data to sit there and say, how's the school doing? Because parents are happy. Other people who don't have intimate knowledge of the school district and what's happening on a day-to-day are the ones that are saying something's wrong, it's broken, but not the parents. And I think that's one of our major problems.
I like to see, mine are all gone. I'm a historian. But I was not one of those parents that said, mine are gone, I'm done. I worked for the schools, and I saw what was going on, and I saw what was needed. I ran solely because I wanted a change. I wanted to see something different. I mean, we had a pretty good superintendent. I wasn't against anything, but there were parents that were reaching out to me, that were calling me, well, what about this, what about that? Well, I'm the one that likes to kick in the door and get things done. So why not run for school board and do just that? I didn't think I was going to win, but I did. And I have made some changes. But as a board member, you want to stand behind parents like Brian here. He's got kids that's, 5 and 4 and 8. I mean, these are babies. So I want to see parents like him to call me and say, Angie, I need your help with this. I actually have one of my my daughter's teacher, former teacher, her daughter actually pulled her kids out of Hillel, which is the private school, the Jewish school, to bring them to Farmington Public Schools. And she's been happy. And it can change some things and make some things great. And they have been pleased with the performance and the education and some of the things that their student couldn't have got at Hillel. So you don't have to be, 61 years old and not want to still be involved, because you have to remember, when your schools fail, your property value fails. So you want to be involved and be connected.
Thank you, Angie. I'd like to remind everyone here that public education is the cornerstone of our democracy, and all of our faiths are intertwined. So just whether or not you have children or not, we all have a stake in public schools and protecting our schools.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add, I thank you for that, Doctor, because that is so right. As I said earlier, our schools are such an extension of our community. That's why it's so important. Now, I have to mention this here, and I know we're talking about charters and we're in Grosse Pointe, but I want people to really think about the rural communities. I know a lot of times Detroit gets all of the press because Detroit needs this, Detroit needs that, but the rural communities are far often worse than what the cities are. And a lot of times, they only have one school for the whole town, and that school is their community hub. It serves so many different purposes. So public education is definitely necessary. It's vital to the lifeblood and the growth of our communities. You can look around and all of the people, some of these billionaires who are probably advocating for charter schools or more unaccountable charter schools. Some of these billionaires probably came out of public charter school systems themselves. Isn't that ironic? But our schools are such an extension of the community, we cannot afford to let that slip away. And I also wanted to just make this point as well. What we're talking about also is equity. Because what Owasso County needs may not be what Sterling Heights needs. But we're talking about equitable and full funding. And the legislature is on the right path. They've done some wonderful things. They've increased some funding, but we need things to be sustainable. We need it to be sustainable. One thing I also wanted to mention when you talk about declining enrollment, take a page out of the playbook for Detroit. I think we misstepped because a lot of people left the city. We're talking some years ago, back in that 1999, 2000 era, when we saw a lot of declining enrollment in Detroit public schools, where we were an A+ district with over 100,000 students, and now it's less than half. And I do believe the influx of charters took advantage of the situation. And parents were talking, but they were all, they had a message and they talked with their feet. They left. And I think it was just a little too late. Sometimes we don't always pay attention to what's not being said about our schools. And this one last thing, that's why I believe in the organization that I'm with, we are hell-bent on community and family, parent and student voice. You've got to find out what your parents are thinking. You've got to find out, ask your youth. They'll tell you. If they're old enough, they'll tell you. Once you have community, that collective voice and that community voice, you could pretty much get done what you need to get done. You don't want a particular school to come in your neighborhood, get your parents. Situations like this, we're talking about the issues. You're learning from folks that have already experienced this and it was not good. Get your parents and your community involved, whether they've got kids or not. And I will say this, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate is I still got my son we're still in the system. And now I'm having grandbabies come in. So I don't know how long I'm gonna be in this. I guess I'll probably, lose my hair, but I'll still be in this fight. But I totally believe it is so important. Our schools are so needed and we need them in our communities because it is an extension of who we are.
All right, well, we're running out of time. So I got an interesting card that came in here that says, can you tell us more about the Hill Point proposal? Well, basically their goal is to open a charter school here in Grosse Pointe in September of 2024. This would be using the quote-unquote Hillsdale curriculum, K-12 curriculum. If you go to their website, it says a lot about the Socratic method and it says a lot about classical education. But it's Hillsdale. We know that it's going to come from a conservative slant. If you look at the book reading list that they have in their curriculum, you can go on the website and see what books they're going to be using to teach and everything else. That's fine. I mean, if you want to send your kid to that, okay. I don't think it's necessary here, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. I'll explain a little bit more in a minute. But then I do want this question here. Is there any public/state control over the style or philosophy of the charter schools? What about separation of church and state? That is one thing that does come into play. There were a couple of overtly religious charter schools in the early days here in Michigan that the Supreme Court stamped out before they got started, one of them being something called the Noah Webster Academy back in 1994, if I'm not mistaken, is when that one came down, but the courts made a decision, you can't have a religious school that gets public funding. There are ways around this though. Political philosophy is something that is allowed in some of these schools. Are there places where, I mean, Oklahoma, Doctor, I know you were talking about this on the phone call the other day. Oklahoma's really pushing the boundaries on this, which could open the floodgates for our public dollars going to religious schools.
And it's going pretty far, and they're facing several lawsuits. So the Oklahoma statewide virtual school board approved, under a 3-2 vote, the nation's first religiously funded by taxpayer dollars charter school. And there's been a lot of controversials about that because, of course, we want to honor the separation of church and state, especially with, again, taxpayer dollars. And since then, their attorney general has also sued the school board for this matter because, again, that's not what we want. We don't want to open public schools that's affiliated with a religion.
Yeah, so I mean, that's going to be something that we'll have to watch pretty carefully here in Michigan. We've only got a couple of minutes left. I just want to put this out there just because I think this is an important discussion. We're talking about the Hill Point proposal here. My big beef with this is, if you want to give your kid a specialized education, there are any number of private schools in our area that are more than willing to do that. If you want to take the time to homeschool your kid in whatever style you want to do it, great. But do not take my tax dollars and put them into some school that basically is going to be cranking out a whole bunch of little maggots, M-A-G-A-T-S, by the way. Because you're afraid to actually let your kids get a classical education, a real education that allows them to learn how to think. This is my problem. It's indoctrination with our tax dollars. I have a real problem with that, and hopefully that's enough. Like I said, you want to homeschool your kid, go for it. But my tax dollars should not be made to create little right-wing soldiers. Sorry. With that, I know we have some materials that we want to talk about, Jeff, and I think that's sort of your responsibility. And as soon as he's done that, I'm going to say thank you to our panel and everything else.